Now, unstructured data is spread across the enterprise, and that's meant more recently with the additional um, cloud storage applications. And we talk to some organizations that have hundreds, sometimes thousands of applications that are repositories, and they have major ones, right? Like it's SharePoint, it's OneDrive, Office 365 in general with emails and messages, old file shares, legacy products, the list goes on. And they're inventing new ones, right? We're adding Blob and S3, and who knows what they'll add next. But with all of this data spread across the enterprise, and it including the inherent nature of unstructured data, which is that it's all human created data for humans. It's the work that your employees are doing, it's the messages and files they either share amongst themselves or customers. And this includes the sentiment, it includes the intent, the dynamic of your organization. And I know this is important to companies, right? Especially with AI. I was talking to one group who was doing a great job with structured data to understand what new products at the bank that they would be offering their customers and even when they should offer those products. But they really slowed down their work when they understood that they had transcripts of the communications of their customers with their bank employees. And they could start seeing the intent and the sentiment of their customers and really start seeing a greater amount of value in their data. So we've seen this work out in AI and before. Now, all of those data sources mean that your nuggets of information, the gold nuggets, the intelligence that you're looking for is spread across the entire enterprise. And each one of those repositories has its own user interface, policies, structure. My goodness, right? Like if you just look at SharePoint, you could have 47 documents, duplicates across 47 different SharePoint sites. And in that scenario, you would be essentially struggling to delete one at a time in some way, shape, or form, unless you can bring those hundreds or even thousands of repositories into one unified archive. Maybe just your major ones, right? If you had your file shares, your emails, and your SharePoint in one place, one user interface for your legal, compliance, records, analytics team to search across. And they could do one search. There's one policy control point. There's one copy, right? It's all organized and scrubbed and basically ready for any project, rather than every project starting with the scrubbing and the policies of information governance policies applied to the individual projects. Apply it to one archive. And that unified governance is going to allow you to save that work in each project. 80 to 90% of your work of dealing with data goes away. It's merely searching and analyzing rather than the exporting and all the scrubbing that goes along with each project. So information governance, without question, has helped our customers. That unified information governance has helped our customers. And that's made all the difference in the world for these companies trying to mitigate risk, make processes, make things run faster, essentially, and really find the intelligence that they otherwise wouldn't have found. If I could change one thing, for information governance, it's interesting. You have millions, maybe billions of documents in repositories spread across the entire enterprise, and many people in information governance are looking to figure out how they can help resolve that or mitigate risk or change things in a positive way. And what they often have to do is they need to reach out to the business units, the owners of those data, authors or their managerial department heads, and they need to ask if they can delete files. And deleting is challenging for lots of reasons, but when you have to delete something that's obviously not a duplicate, when you need to delete and there's owners that have a stake in this, and the business needs to specify whether or not they'd like to retain the document, they're often given manifest laundry lists, long lists of files with metadata. And if you're looking at 47,000, and one of our customers does this by the hundreds of thousands, if you're giving a list of documents and you have metadata only, the date created, the author, the age, file name, if that's all you have to go on, these files don't get deleted. And that's what I hear from many of the people that we speak to. You have these attempts that have been made over the years where companies like mine will come in and say, we can help you with 40 to 60% of your data that we believe is redundant, obsolete, or trivial. Let us help you delete those things. And many of the products, lo and behold, when they get put into place, create these manifests and help you identify with metadata tens of thousands of documents, and again, hundreds of thousands in the case of one of our customers at a time. And the business units look at this and they say, well, we got to retain it all because we don't know what's in this data. These files are still a mystery, and without understanding, how can we say pull the trigger? Now, companies have told us in these prior attempts that they can delete maybe 5% of their data, not 40 or 50 or 60%, but 5%, because that may be the low-hanging fruit, the easy to understand from a file name, or obvious duplicates. However, that doesn't solve the problem. And what people are clamoring for, what people need infused into this process, when they hand over a manifest of 47,000 documents, something of that nature, with metadata, there needs to be more information per document. There needs to be something that helps them illuminate the value or the lack thereof to the business unit so they can decide whether or not to delete. An obvious example is PII finders. They might say something like, there's an email address in this document, and it just says an email address. Well, whose email address? If it's a name, it might specify there's a name in a document, and it might be Snickers, not a person's PII. There's an awful lot beyond metadata and PII that has to be looked into to understand the value. And there needs to be something that can summarize or describe. We do it with tagging, right? So you can use pointed content searches, and with the pointed content searches, you can find the documents that have particular value points or lack thereof. And then through sometimes hundreds of tags applied, you can have a few dozen or maybe a dozen associated with a document to identify what metadata cannot. And that allows one of our customers, for example, to delete millions of documents a month because they're supplying lists of documents where the business units can understand what's in them. It tells a story of what's in their data, and the company and its officers can make better decisions with that intelligence. That's what has to change, is people need to understand what's in the data, and the people that are making decisions on that data need to be given the tools, the information regarding each individual file to make thousands of decisions a month. And you'll need something put in place to do it. Companies come to us looking for change in a way that I thought would have been backwards. It's not the IG teams that are coming to us. It's CFOs, not necessarily directly, and IT directors coming to us dealing with storage budgets. And they're looking to make changes because there's most likely an influx of storage costs due to an acquisition, bringing on more data for one reason or another in large chunks, or say, backup and recovery, or some sort of change. And with those change in contracts or change in data that's often charged by the terabyte, they're looking to avoid whatever the new storage costs are. And I mean, I can think of one example recently where we started talking to a company because they were debating on whether or not they would be opening a new data center. So this can look different ways. And the information governance groups have been predominantly asking for any number of changes over the years, but they generally don't get funded, even with the tsunami of new data, the large increase of new data, and how difficult it is to organize it and know what's in there. So we see that price-conscious group, individuals looking to avoid additional monthly charges per terabyte, by groups that are looking for low-hanging fruit. They're looking to delete everything after 7 or 10 years, just the old stuff, without really understanding what value those documents might have. One group we spoke to recently was talking about how their founder's father had handwritten documents that had been digitized, and the values of the company and where they started from were found in the handwritten notes of the founder's father's digitized documents. And there's nuggets that just can't be replaced, even though they're old. However, it's quick and easy to delete things that are 10 years old and longer. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for low-hanging fruit in their metadata. And metadata is a cheap resolution. It's really easy to find a solution that can analyze metadata. But if you want to understand what's in your data, if you want to make sure that you're not creating legal risk, compliance issues, not throwing away the nuggets of intelligence that you would want to analyze or retain, you'll need to know what's in the content. And so it can't be a metadata only process. You have to understand what's in your documents before you wholesale remove large amounts of it, let alone delete anything. I started in the information governance field more than 10 years ago with Symantec, so I'm aware of the security challenges. But the data portion of information governance, the challenge of managing the data, managing the risk within it, and now maximizing the value of analytics due to the increase of interest in artificial intelligence. A lot of those issues have become much more difficult to manage due to the proliferation of data sources like WhatsApp. Unstructured data has certainly no shortages of repositories. If you look at SharePoint, tens of thousands of sites can be created at the largest of companies. You have blob storage and S3, so we're creating new unstructured data repositories. And then there's a massive increase in file creation. Many new apps or agents are automated and making more, even if the employees weren't. Now, these three expansions in unstructured data challenges have made it more challenging for organizations to know what's in their data and know where the risky data or valuable data resides. Every company that comes to us now, due to the extreme challenges and volumes and all the things I've mentioned, are asking for automations and AI. They're looking to unencumber themselves with the work of reviewing hundreds of thousands, millions, and sometimes billions of documents. However, they're not so much ready to take on the evolution of information governance for that type of data. One, it takes a lot of trust to put within a company. Some have attempted that without question. You see companies that have tried file share cleanup projects and attempts at organizing their data. PII finding is pretty typical. but it's a large undertaking, and it's not something that's going to be managed completely by software, even if automations and AI exist. And to this day, right, it changes rapidly, but AI currently isn't ready. What we've seen from the marketing of different companies and what different companies have produced isn't revolutionizing information governance or resolving those issues today. For the most part, people have Office 365, maybe Google Suite, but in the Fortune 1000, Office 365 is more common. And I mean, what we hear predominantly is that Purview is good enough. And companies are adopting risk appetites, or kind of pretty much they're okay with not understanding what's in that dark data to date. Gaps in information governance are felt differently by the top and the bottom of organizations. It's the work that these portions of the company do are simply different. The bottom of the org chart spends their time manually reviewing documents or trying to keep up with technology to help with information governance, but without a robust or comprehensive product that's going to address some issues that are mostly left unresolved. Companies struggle with similar issues to one pharmaceutical company we spoke to. They had a lawsuit that involved aspirin. The word aspirin would be searched, and what would happen is this company is spending time and money reviewing too many false positives and needed to understand where the word aspirin was used in their unstructured data relevant to their case. And for all the software they had around e-discovery, information governance, Office 365, the company was spending an inordinate amount of money, not just on this lawsuit, but every other lawsuit that they would have where search terms would be required and they couldn't do it with just custodians. So you have the top of the organization seeing the pain in operational costs due to the manual labor. And companies and prospects we speak to, they're very aware of the manual processes, the different things that cost or increase those bills and expenses. And some of them are clamoring for and can't evolve, but they need proactive information governance. You need to understand what's in your data. You need to have it organized and tagged. And I think the information governance community that's doing the work for legal and compliance records is aware of that, but they haven't been able to justify the expense or create new teams of information governance folks to address the petabytes of data that are building up at different companies. And they're really doing just enough. They kind of find what they need when they need it after great expense, and stop calamity or stop the house of cards from falling. Areas of opportunity that companies have in the information governance space are really getting highlighted by the LLMs and the drive for AI and AI analytics. However, what's remarkable is we've gone to any number of AI conferences. We work with companies and speak to companies for any number of reasons. And in the unstructured data space, we don't see and we don't hear from companies that tell us that they're confident that their data that's going into their AI analytics is scrubbed or appropriate or the best. They don't know if they have PII in there, sensitive data. And I spoke to one insurance company in particular. I was speaking to their IG team that is separate from the AI team, right? One of the greater challenges in this process is managing the stakeholders' requirements and bringing all the stakeholders together and still moving forward with projects without getting held up in committee, as it were. And the IG folks at this one large insurance company were explaining to me that they'd been told that their AI would be clean of PII and sensitive data. However, nothing had been done to scrub the data for PII or sensitive data. So the conclusion for the information governance team is that if nothing had been done, that their AI would include the confidential data of both the company and their customers. It's a emphasis on progress in AI and a risk appetite that companies take on that has been pretty present in information governance. In AI, it's more obvious, but most companies haven't done the work to proactively understand what's in their data. Most companies haven't proactively done much more than, say, apply PII filters in cybersecurity measures, maybe DLP to lock the data down, ensuring nobody emails a social security number. But if you have 30, 40, 50% of your data, which is rot, obsolete, trivial, redundant, and you're paying for the storage of all that data, I'm confident that your company doesn't know what's in their data. Weaknesses and institutional issues with respect to information governance. There's a lot of stakeholders in information governance. And AI has brought on a lot of new challenges. It also has shown us that people or organizations are pretty comfortable, have increased their risk appetite with unstructured data specifically, in respects to getting value out of their data with AI. As an organization, I'm not aware of any conversations we've had with other organizations that have been able to kind of scrub their unstructured data before it goes into AI, with the exception of the companies that are putting in so few documents they can manually read them. But for the most part, we talk to AI analytics folks, and they are working on AI and still also very concerned about how to scrub the data that goes into AI. So from what we hear from records managers, legal, and analytics and AI departments, folks really have struggled with this issue that has persisted for the last 10 to 15 years, which is dark data. Unstructured has a nature to it, kind of a chaotic nature to it in an organization, but also it's spread across many repositories, from your file shares, Office 365, SharePoint, OneDrive, Box. Now we have Blob in Azure and S3 in AWS. So, I mean, the changing qualities or requirements of information governance will always be a challenge. AI has peaked that, and dark data has never really been resolved. Folks are really struggling to still understand what's in a large part of their data. Areas of opportunity for information governance solutions is an interesting topic. Information governance is kind of hounded. One of the major problems in information governance that you'll find is that the solutions, as well as the IT environment those solutions are supposed to address, are silos. There's institutional partitioning between your departments, legal, compliance, AI, records, those charged with the responsibility of information governance. Each one of them can have their own repositories, so there's more partitioning and silos there that don't talk to each other. We have a number of pharmaceutical customers who have, before we talk to them, records management solutions for each department, and they can have quite a bit of redundancy. So you have this information governance need, but all your both solutions and the silos of your repositories are disparate. You have everything spread out across the enterprise, and of course, cloud isn't helping, but you have everything spread out. And there are a few companies in the market, ZL Tech included, but there's others as well, that are trying to put as much of the information governance, both data is the data that you need to manage through information governance, you need to put as much of that along with the solutions under as few umbrellas as possible. That way you aren't creating a larger information governance problem by creating additional silos when you add complexity. What suffers when there's a lack of information governance planning, or not robust enough of a plan, if there's a problem there, if it's not solvable, the company will certainly suffer, most likely struggle with reputation in the market. Whatever information governance problem has come up will most likely be known, right? Whether it be a leak or a breakdown of security or something else. If it's something that's solvable, when it's a real problem, companies more often than not don't have the time to set up a system that would apply automatically. Most likely at that point, at the 12th hour, as it were, they'll have to do something rather rushed, usually extremely manual and wildly expensive, right? So I can think of an example where both happened to a company. One company had 2 lawsuits come through in Europe, and likely a third in the United States was close behind, and billions are at stake in each of these lawsuits. They'd, instead of putting their legal team in charge of legal holds, but also putting legal teams in charge of what was likely to come up in expected legal cases, they had deleted too much. And when they deleted too much, it was gone. And so it created certainly an issue with their reputation outwardly, out into the market, as the lawsuits came to bear. And then additionally, they spent an awful lot of time in kind of fire drill mode, trying to find their data, understand what was in their data, prepare for court. So their legal costs shot through the roofs. Their IT costs shot through the roofs. And there was really nothing to do about what had already been deleted. They were just trying to salvage what they could. And ultimately, it cost them a lot of money, and they most likely will have to settle to avoid an even larger problem.